Now, we have on many occasions reported on these kinds of tactics and denounced them. And given how popular such critiques are among everyone other than pro-establishment liberal leftists, it would be very easy for me to continue to do so. It's an easy thing for me to offer my audience, since I know my audience, and I believe that most of them, most of you, likely concur with my assessment of woke ideology, and particularly the immoral tactics I just described, that not only unfairly seek to vilify people and try unjustly to destroy their reputations, but far worse, place vital societal and political debates off limits by making clear that unless you agree with their prevailing orthodoxy, they will try, and often succeed, in destroying your reputation. I have no doubt I will continue to report on the use of, by the liberal left, of these dreary and lowly tactics. But for tonight, I would like to ask you to consider whether parts of the American and Western right use the same tactic, not by calling unjustly or demonizing someone as racist for their views on policing, or smearing someone as misogynistic for their views on due process, or declaring someone transphobic for questioning the use of medication on children, but instead maligning people as anti-Semitic for either criticizing the government of a foreign country, Israel, or questioning whether the U.S. should continue to transfer billions and billions of dollars every year to strengthen that foreign country, even while citizens of Israel enjoy benefits like healthcare coverage and access to college that many American citizens themselves still do not share. Note that I'm not talking here about people who express hatred for Jewish people, of which I'm one, just by the way, but who take policy positions on Israel and the U.S.'s relationship with it that are said to be motivated by hidden or implicit or unstated, but somehow still self-evident animus toward Jewish people. And relatedly, the question we want to explore is this: has the tactic of casting critics of Israel or U.S. aid toward Israel resulted, either unintentionally or by design, in suppressing debate over these questions due to fear that the people who express dissent will be accused of being an anti-Semite? Still one of the most toxic and destructive accusations that can be attached to one's reputation, all due to their refusal to affirm the prevailing ideology on these questions. Now, I raise this because it's a self-evidently important question, for the same reason that it's vital not to allow baseless bigotry accusations to be used by the left to suppress debate and unjustly destroys people's reputation due to legitimate political dissent. But I also raise this because censorship of Israel critics in virtually every American institution now, media, academia, and even under the force of law, is one of the most common forms of the kinds of suppression of free speech that we on this show frequently cover and criticize. Just today, we have a brand new example of it that, while by no means the most blockbuster story ever, illustrates how pervasive is this tactic, precisely because it was wielded against someone who, if he can be called a critic of Israel at all, he's one of the most unyieldingly timid and respectful and deferential and mild in how he expresses those critiques, and yet he was denied an opportunity, a job opportunity, by one of the most powerful institutions in the country, Harvard, as a result of those criticisms. Here is an article in today's New York Times that reports on this story. It was several weeks ago that the former executive director of Human Rights Watch, Ken Roth, was offered a fellowship, only for the dean of Harvard's Kennedy School to reject it due to the dean's concerns that Ken Roth had in the past criticized Israel's human rights abuses the way, in the capacity of executive director of that group, he criticized almost every country on the planet's human rights abuses. And today, the New York Times reports that although it no longer matters, since Kenneth Roth got and accepted a position with the University of Pennsylvania, as you can see in the headline, quote, Harvard reverses course on human rights advocate who criticized Israel. The article reads, quote, the Harvard Kennedy School reversed course on Thursday and said it would offer a fellowship to a leading human rights advocate it had previously rejected after news of the decision touched off a public outcry over academic freedom, donor influence, and the boundaries of criticism of Israel. The controversy erupted earlier this month when The Nation published a lengthy article revealing that last summer, the school's dean, Douglas Elmendorf, had vetoed a proposal by the school's Carr Center for Human Rights Policy to offer a one-year fellowship to Kenneth Roth, the recently retired executive director of Human Rights Watch. At the time, Elmendorf told colleagues that he was concerned about perceptions that Human Rights Watch had a bias against Israel, according to 2 faculty members. Now, let me just stop here and remind you that we are not talking about elementary school teachers or middle school teachers, where I think one might be rightly concerned about what they intend to teach to one's children. We're talking here about a person who would not even be in a teaching position, but even if he were, he would be at one of the most influential academic institutions on the planet, Harvard, and speaking with and interacting with adults, people who are capable of hearing, quote, biased views. In fact, one of the reasons you go to college is to learn how to interact with and critically evaluate views with which you disagree. You read all kinds of things that contain all sorts of views and biases that modern society now condemns, or even ones that they support. Adults in college can handle disagreement. That's a major argument that comes from the right when faculty members and academic institutions try and censor conservative views or students on the grounds that they're racist or transphobic or misogynistic. And yet now here we have the same exact thing, but from the other side, namely that Harvard students and Harvard itself can't possibly be associated with somebody who criticizes Israel beyond the, quote, boundaries that have been imposed on this discourse. Boundaries imposed by whom? And why do those boundaries exist? Now, the article goes on, quote, the revelations prompted sharp rebukes from prominent free expression groups, a letter signed by more than 1,000 Harvard students, faculty, and alumni criticizing what it called, quote, a shameful decision to blacklist Kenneth Roth, and private complaints from faculty. Quote, penalizing people for criticizing Israel is hardly limited to me, he continued. What is the Kennedy School and Harvard more broadly going to do to show this episode conveys a renewed commitment to academic freedom rather than just exceptional treatment for one well-known individual? By which he means that as Kenneth Roth, he has a large platform. He was able to bang the table and be heard and embarrass Harvard and cause them to reverse it. But what about students who are critics of Israel and get punished, as I'll show you that they routinely are on campuses around the country, or people who don't have similar public platforms? Quote, Roth had been recruited for the fellowship, which includes no teaching duties, by Matthias Reese, the director of the Carr Center. In an email to Carr Center students, faculty members, fellows, alumni, and others following the Nation article, Rice called him, quote, one of the most distinguished human rights leaders of our time, and said the following the fellowship rejection was, quote, one of the lowest moments of my professional life. In interviews and emails with the Times, Reese and another faculty member, Catherine Sicknick, said that Elmendorf, the dean, in explaining his rejection of Roth, had cited the perception that Human Rights Watch was, quote, biased against Israel. He told them he had become aware of the issue following discussions with unnamed people within the university, they say. Now, let me just stop and say here 2 things. Number one, as someone who is actually a critic of Israel for a long time, it's an issue that's important to me in part because my government is a major supporter of the Israeli government, which makes it, in my view, my responsibility to question and criticize or examine and scrutinize the countries that my government is playing such a major role in propping up, which is why I don't think it's my business how countries around the world that the United States is not involved in manage to conduct their own affairs, but I absolutely think it's the business of every American to ask what countries are we supporting and how, and that makes it our business. But also, as a Jew, someone in whose name Israel not only exists, but engages in a lot of this behavior, including behavior that I regard as violations of human rights, I also feel an extra responsibility to criticize it the way that I criticize my own government and other governments in order to do so. And I have to say, as someone who's done that for a long time, I've always regarded Kenneth Roth as Kenneth Roth as incredibly pro-Israel. He's the head of a human rights organization that's supposed to denounce and monitor human rights abuses around the world. I personally regard the Israeli treatments of Palestinians in Gaza as a particularly abusive form of human rights abuse. These are millions of people barred from leaving their own country, trapped in an open-air prison. You can debate that all you want, but that's my view. And I've always seen Kenneth Roth as somebody who seems very reluctant to criticize Israel, except in the most careful and tepid way. He's an outspoken supporter of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. His support for Israel goes back many decades. And when he criticizes Israel, it's almost like in a way that seems cursory. Like, of course, as a head of a human rights group, I have to criticize Israel and the U.S. occasionally, but 90% of his attacks, at least, are on enemies of the United States. He loves to criticize China and Iran and Russia, whoever the United States government condemns. That's easy to do, and that's most of what he does. When he ventures into criticizing the United States and Israel, it's very, very reluctant. It's very, very deferential and polite. And so if somebody as mild as he is disqualified from holding positions at places like Harvard, then the boundaries of the discourse are extremely narrow in a way that I don't think we want, no matter what our views are, the boundaries to be on any debate. That is what the woke warriors of American liberalism do. They try and constantly narrow the range of debate, and if you step 1 inch outside of it, you're guilty of bigotry. And I think this incident shows that one step outside or 1 inch outside what are considered legitimate criticisms of Israel, which are very, very few, will disqualify you and make you radioactive and even lose your job, as just happened to him. Now again, he'll be fine. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.